windowsill. Been so lonesome chasing that morning chill. Oh, little red bird, open your mouth and say, been so lonesome, I just about flown away. So long now I've been out in the rain and snow, but winter's come and gone, a little bird told me so.
Hello, and welcome to the How I Healed podcast. I am joined today by my co host, Mary Lou Singleton, who is a family nurse practitioner, herbalist, and apprentice trained home birth midwife. She has been caring for the health of New Mexican families for over 25 years. Mary Lou believes all healthcare modalities, from allopathic medicine to energy work and everything in between, have healing potential. That healing is always an individual journey to be supported by community, and that when it comes to healing, effectiveness is the measure of the truth. She is a critic of the pharmaceutical industry and the mainstream medical industry, which promotes drug dependence and chronic disease maintenance rather than healing. She believes healing is always possible and co-created the How I Healed podcast to share stories of healing, hope, and recovery.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm Mary Lou, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Jocelyn McDonald, who is an artist and storyteller. She is enlivened by the infinite potential of humans to heal and helps others walk this path through her art and music. Her healing practice focuses on making and finding meaning out of the crises and major choice points of our lives. She offers one-on-one support through coaching and archetypical astrology and tarot. She specializes in assisting with psychedelic integration and pharmaceutical cessation.
Listeners to the How I Healed podcast have heard Mary Lou and I talk a lot about our dreams and how much healing is done in the dream realm. I have begun a 6-month course in dreaming for those who are interested in deepening their dream practice, increasing their recall, learning what plant spirit allies can support dream work, how to lucid dream, how to interpret your dreams, how to heal your body, how to speak to the dead. All of these things we're going to go over in my 6-month course, Dreaming a New World. So we already kicked off the course last month in July with our first class, Remembering Your Dreams. And this Sunday, August 18th, the second class kicks off with Plant Spirit Allies. So if you want to sign up for all 6 courses, each class is only $11 to drop in. Otherwise, each class is $15 to drop in. Either way, whether you sign up for one class or all 6 classes, you will be added to our dream sharing container on Telegram, a private group where you can share your dreams, get daily dreaming tips from me, and ask for feedback from other dreamers on your interpretations or your practice. So get conscious with your dreaming and come join us.
Welcome back to the How I Healed podcast. Today we have Sena Maria as our guest, and so excited to have her on the show. She was actually helping a friend of mine. That's how I discovered her. So Sena Maria supports women to embrace a nourished, resilient, and radiantly healthy state. As a remineralizer and wellness explorer, she uses mineral nutritional balancing to rebuild our mineral heritage and get to the root of our health issues. She believes that we are only as healthy as our cells, and by supporting our body's ability to create energy and eliminate toxins efficiently, we can return to the simple, natural joy of being alive. So I'm really curious, what your beliefs about your body or your health or health in general were before you discovered minerals. Because I saw on your website that you had only encountered mineralization through winning a contest, through
Yes.
through getting a prize. And with such a synchronistic event for you to be initiated into this path, I'm just wondering, what were your beliefs prior to this that were informing your way of being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I grew up in a very conventional medical approach. Anytime I had a foot ache, I would go to the doctor, just like anything. And I remember I had this experience once where this older man doctor, like, I was getting like my skin checked out. I don't even know why. Like I was worried I had skin cancer or something. Like, no, there's no like reason for that. But I think I was like, oh, maybe my moles are weird. I don't know. Anyways, but he just clipped off a mole that I had been born with on my thigh. And I didn't say anything because I was like, that one I was born with. And then he came back and he was like, oh, you had that when you were born. That's not whatever. And I've had so many experiences like that with where I just eventually, as I got older, I was less enthused about doctors. I didn't like that approach. It didn't seem to really make a lot of sense to me. I did get into more like alternative medicine, like herbal medicine, naturopath kind of approaches, acupuncture, chiropractic. So that was kind of me like understanding that there's more to health than just like waiting until you have an issue and going to someone else to tell you how to fix it. And then I got into plant medicine. And so that was like the phase where I was really like, all of our physical ailments have a spiritual, component, which like I think, that could still be true and exist, but that's not really like my main focus at all anymore. And then I was kind of, when I was really in the depths of my histamine intolerance, that was like my main issue I was having. I didn't know. I first I got into like genetics and was like, maybe I have messed up genes, paid a ridiculous amount of money for a genetics test, like I was kind of in that place of being on Instagram swirling around like, what's wrong? I had done the parasite cleanses, I did keto, I did, I don't know, probably a bunch of other stuff. And yeah. And so I think like before the mineral piece, I had done a bunch of plant medicine and then I got more sick eventually. And so I was kind of lost. I didn't have a deep belief. And I really would say I didn't have a deep connection with my body in the way that I do now.
Can I ask a question? It's like a little point.
Yeah.
As an herbalist, I just want to ask, by plant medicine, do you mean you were doing like nettle and alfalfa infusions that are all full of nutrition and getting to know plants as healers, or by plant medicine, do you mean the very small subset of plants that are psychedelic?
Totally. I'm referring to the psychedelic subset. And that's
Okay.
important clarification because it's all, yeah, it doesn't, all the plants are medicine for sure.
And when people say plant medicine, they're often also talking about fungi.
Yeah, which are not plants.
Frog medicine and yeah,
right,
totally.
yeah, totally. And frogs, right? Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frogs are not plants.
An
Yeah.
interesting cultural linguistic twist we're experiencing right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
awesome.
That is a great, yeah. Can you tell us about your histamine intolerance and how that was presenting for you and what that journey of healing was like?
Yeah. Sorry, my cat is here and she's purring kind of right into the mic. So if
She's
that's,
welcome. Yeah.
you
And you
know.
might see my cat come and purr into the mic later. He's obsessive with us recording podcasts.
Oh, great. Yeah. They're like,
Happily cuddling a cat is a great sign that you don't have histamine intolerance.
There you go. That's
so true. That is real. Yeah. So my histamine intolerance, I would say it started probably it really started without me realizing it in my late 20s. So I'm 35 now. I started to become, I was intolerant to dairy all of a sudden. I couldn't do glucose anymore. I just became a lot more like sensitive. I started to develop seasonal allergies, which was never a thing before. But I wasn't really paying attention to it. I was kind of just, oh, this is annoying. But that was also coinciding with like my psychedelic plant medicine work, which is very depleting. I came to find out later in life. And, my symptoms were getting worse, kind of like subtly over time, but they were definitely getting worse. I was like having hot flashes at night, which isn't necessarily a histamine intolerance thing, but that was just, I was having all sorts of stuff going on, like crazy fatigue, just like energy, ups and downs. And then I guess it was in 2021, I got COVID and that pushed me over the edge. So like my histamine bucket just like overflowed. And after that point, I had to cook every meal fresh. I had to freeze my meat. I was so sensitive. I was just like, yeah, like I really felt kind of disabled, like I couldn't really do a lot. And the thing with histamine stuff, I don't know if either of you have experienced it, but it's so hard because it's so inconsistent because it's dependent on where a histamine bucket is. So if you're low stress, and you might be able to tolerate like some chocolate or strawberries, but if you're, in a more stressful state and got a lot going on, and then you have a strawberry, like that could push you over the edge. So anyways, it was a struggle for
So
sure.
would you describe it? I am not that familiar with it. So what I'm getting from you, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you were you were having almost an allergic reaction to everyday things, but it wasn't consistent enough to where you could say, oh, I'm allergic to strawberries. Every single time I have a strawberry, I have an allergic reaction. It's, oh, is today going to be the day that a strawberry puts me into a state of reactivity and like sickness?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Essentially, that's a great summary.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow. So I am really curious to return to the subject of plant medicines because I am a psychedelic facilitator and a user of entheogens of all sorts. And so I have played around with this a lot. And I think that the more I'm in this world, the more I encounter people who are diving into this with no understanding that going on dietas and using entheogens can deplete you of minerals. So
Yeah.
when this all began for you, what type of relationship were you developing with the plant masters and which ones?
Yeah, totally. So my first experience, my first introduction to the this realm of plant medicine was cacao, ceremonial cacao. So that was, I don't know, 2015 maybe.
Mhm.
And I sat in my first cacao ceremony. I was in Mexico, and it like blew my whole mind. I mean, it was so healing. Like I had never sat in a ceremony like that. My heart was wide open. My anxiety was like, it really helped with my anxiety. So then I went really deep with cacao, and I started sitting with it on my own and just developing my own relationship with it. And there wasn't a lot of cacao ceremonies back then, but I would try and find them. And then I eventually started training and holding ceremonial space. And then I worked for my friend's cacao company. So I went really deep in the world of ceremonial cacao. And I think it's a beautiful medicine. And I think there's like some aspects about cacao and chocolate in general from like a mineral and metal perspective that I didn't know about. So it's like pretty high in copper, which isn't a problem in itself, but we all have bio-individual places where we're at in our mineral levels. And for some of us, that can be more detrimental depending on how, different things are functioning in our body. But that's kind of my side.
Right. Because
Yeah.
we all need copper, but if you have enough and then you were to take on more, might it interrupt your ability to absorb or release other minerals? Because they all work together.
They
So
all
is
work
that why?
together. They all work together. With copper specifically, it needs to be bound or bioavailable. So copper is
Ah,
super important. I mean, a lot of things need to be bound, but the issue with copper is that if, let's say, our adrenal function is low, our liver is going to have a harder time creating a copper binding protein.
got
So
you.
if we are in that place where we're, have low adrenaline, we're burned out, we're pushing ourselves too hard, we're not having enough of the protein that will bind to the copper, and then we're eating a ton of copper, drinking a ton of copper, in our diet with cacao and all the other things like avocados, etc. That's where there's a problem. We also need retinol, which is vitamin A, but you get the vitamin A from animals. It's not the beta carotene that you get from carrots. We need that to be able to properly utilize and metabolize copper. So
Mhm.
there's a web of things where that's why copper can become an issue. And copper is synced, it tracks with estrogen. And so for women, especially if we've ever been on birth control, which like how many of us have, that, we're kind of more susceptible to copper toxicity in the system.
Mhm. Okay, that's a great example.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
important
thank
one.
you.
Mhm. Yeah, so cacao was my intro, and then I started, and I had, I think I had, experienced mushrooms like psilocybin a handful of times before that, but yeah, then I really got into like mescaline, like the San Pedro cactus. I've sat with peyote a couple times, and then ayahuasca handful of times ish. But I think the thing that like I was in a place in my life where I was really diving in. So I wasn't like drinking ayahuasca every single weekend, but I was in that culture. I was, around the community of people that a lot of them did drink it like every weekend. A lot of people were like, the more the better. We just got to heal. We got to purge. We got to cleanse. We got to shed, and I did the hape and the sananga. I mean, I was kind of in that world for a while there. And then I got really into microdosing psilocybin for a while. And then that was, that actually was, looking back, that kind of became a crutch for me. As my physical health, my energy levels were decreasing, I started to become kind of dependent on my cacao microdose ceremony. So I wasn't eating breakfast. I'd wake up and have my psilocybin cacao. Felt like I had to do that if I was going to do a podcast interview or do any work stuff. I felt dependent on that. And I think that just made things worse.
Can you tell us how psilocybin affects the mineral matrix in our body?
Oh, such a good question. So I've been having some good conversations with friends about this. There's not a lot of evidence out there. There's one study that actually was taken down. I don't know, I can't find it anymore, but there's one study that I know of that found that psilocybin and a lot of the other, psilocybin, I think they did ayahuasca, they definitely tested mescaline, also MDMA, that they found that they depleted magnesium ions in the body. So it was actually in the context of stroke risk for people taking psychedelics, where if you're already magnesium depleted and then you were to take a high dose of something, that could be a serious risk. So the thing with psilocybin that's really interesting, so it works in the serotonin pathways, and we've been kind of led to believe, or there's been research in the past that has shown that we talk about serotonin as this happy molecule, like SSRIs, antidepressants, they work in the serotonin pathway. But actually serotonin is more of a hibernation molecule. It's not really the uplifting molecule. It really increases in bears before they hibernate. And there's a lot I could say about that. Maybe SSRIs are just kind of dampening us and making us more numb. But anyways.
You think so? Sorry.
Right? Yeah. Totally. Yeah. But it's maybe, I don't know, maybe there's more to the story than.
Take your soul suppressants. Otherwise you might feel too much. Sorry. Right. You can edit that out, Jocelyn.
I wouldn't dare.
I mean, I feel for people. I mean, I know a lot of people that are taking antidepressants, and I have full respect. It's a rough world out there, and no judgment. And we just have to be. Some people really think that those are, going to heal them, or there's a lot of side effects to taking pharmaceuticals like that. I think that's just kind of the honest truth.
Absolutely. And not to mention that none of the studies that we have are really proving consistently positive results. And I think that's really where the focus needs to be. Why are we dumping chemicals into people and they're still committing suicide? They're still reporting emotional deadening or emotional numbing, or, their libido is completely castrated chemically. Why are we doing this? So there's not, if there were all this evidence that was every person who takes antidepressants, they're going to have a positive effect, or at least they're not going to increase in suicidality. But what do we have? We have literally, for half the people who take them, they're I actually feel worse.
Yeah.
And now I'm addicted to Wellbutrin, and if I go off, I'll have akaphasia and try to kill myself. Something about this.
Well, and pharmaceuticals deplete minerals as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a book called Drug Muggers. There's a website, I'm forgetting the name, but you can look up what pharmaceutical and what minerals it impacts in your body. That to me, from my lens, I'm if we want people to get well and we're giving them something that's going to continue to deplete them, they're taking it every day, that's not going to help anything. So serotonin, sorry, go ahead.
I just found it so interesting what you said about the studies disappearing and being retracted on psilocybin. Just being old enough to have watched the culture shift from all the studies on cannabis were about how terrible it was, watching those be debunked and an influx of money coming in to promote pro-cannabis studies right at the beginning of big cannabis. And I think it's really clear that the age of big psilocybin is coming, and that we're going to have a psilocybin shop on every corner like we do in my town with cannabis right now. And there is a real money motivation behind what gets published and what information gets to the public about consumer products.
Absolutely. No, it's such a good point. And I can't say, I don't know if it was retracted. I don't know what happened to that one study. I didn't dive into it, but the point, people ask me a lot about minerals and psychedelics, and I'm like, no one's funding studies on that. It's not of interest to, corporations. But just to close the loop on the serotonin histamine piece, because no one's really talking about this that I've seen. I have one good friend, Sarah, who's a nurse practitioner. So she's got like that science brain that I don't have as much. And we've been like diving into this, but basically, so serotonin has an impact on estrogen in the body. And so histamine intolerance is very related to estrogen dominance, or like basically building up too much estrogen in the body where you're not able to eliminate it properly. And estrogen dominance, I think a lot of women are struggling with that, and we don't, not realizing it, but anything from, acne to weight gain to PMS to histamines to headaches. I mean, it's kind of all balled in one in a way, like they're all so connected and interrelated. But yeah, so serotonin is primarily produced in the gut. And I don't have all the pieces in place. The DAO enzyme is really important for histamine, for our body to process histamine and eliminate it. So for people that have histamine intolerance, they usually have a shortage of this enzyme, or the enzyme's not working properly. And so that's why the histamine's building up. And there's a relation there with the serotonin from the SSRIs. There's like all these pieces that I'm still kind of like pulling together, but I can just say that I feel that we don't fully understand the impacts of something like microdosing psilocybin on the hormonal system for women and men. But like, I think there's a lot more to the story that will probably be like come out in the future that we were like, oh, okay, maybe that was throwing the body more like out of balance than we realized.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back for one more question about the psychedelics, because you were saying that you had come to feel a reliance or a crutch in the psilocybin cacao, and I really identify with that. See it in so many people that I'm either friends with or have worked with. I wonder if you could speak to the zeitgeist or to your place within a community of heavy plant medicine and, like shaman, because anybody who comes to speak with the plants is a shaman. I'm not trying to gatekeep the concept of developing a one-to-one relationship with the spirit of a plant. I'm just saying, sorry to go off on a tangent. Can you speak to this sort of impulse within yourself or within the people that you are around to know that healing needs to take place and to reach for the plants? Because I'm hearing this in you saying that this was a crutch. It's you reached for that crutch because you were feeling the call to heal, and you knew that healing needed to take place. And you identified the plants as having the answer. Can you speak to the sort of moment that we're having where so many of us are being drawn to this one type of teacher versus like the wisdom of the body? Because I really see a shift for you from the outside teacher to what does the body need and what is my own like mineral matrix calling out for, rather than what is this teacher, what is this mushroom trying to tell me, what is this chocolate trying to tell me?
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered. I think there is a deep desire and need for spiritual connection. And so I think that drives a lot of the, plant medicine. It's kind of, from a Western perspective, it's, oh, you get it all. You get the spiritual connection and it's going to heal your trauma, and then everything's going to, it's just like it's gonna heal everything. Is kind of how it's, presented, or how we understand it with our kind of limited worldview for matters like this. And so I think, and I think that's beautiful. Like people are feeling called, there's many people where I'm like, wow, you're like going to sit in ceremony. Cool. Didn't expect that, and that's awesome. I think there is a level of consciousness expansion that like the plants are so amazing for. I will say though, the shadow of it is that it is being treated by many like taking a pill. And I believe we're in a really unique place in our mineral makeup. Like I really, I believe we are generationally minerally deficient, like 4 to 5 generations deep at this point, really since the, beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when processed food came online and our nutrient density decreased, the amount of toxins increased, the amount of heavy metals increased. I mean, we're just I'm calling it the fallout of the Industrial Revolution. That's our generations right now. That's why there's such an increase in autoimmune and chronic illness, and I mean, so many things. And so I really feel like we're also more fragile. That's definitely like Western, modern developed people are more fragile because we're more exposed to all these things and we've been eating less nutrient dense foods for hundreds of years. And so we're more, we've kind of been conditioned, especially I feel like kind of like the baby boomer generation, like it's very much reach outside of myself, like quick fix, like processed food is better, the government says is great. Like it's very, they just have a level of trust that is really sweet and also unfortunately just not serving us anymore. And so I think there's kind of this habitual wanting someone outside of ourselves to fix things. And I think with that fragility and lack of, mineral resilience, we are more depleted and we're also more responsible and more stressed out and more fast paced. So we're like trying to keep up. And so that's where things like, oh, okay, like I'd rather not take an SSRI. I'm just going to microdose every day because that's better, which like arguably, yeah, I would say so. But it's still depending on something outside of ourselves. It's still like, why, from my perspective with mineral balancing, it's like everything comes down to how well your body's able to produce energy and eliminate toxins. So if you're not producing energy, why is that happening? And how can we, resolve that? What does your body need when we're reaching for something, whether it's sugar or microdosing or cacao or, food or plant medicines, when we're reaching for something, to me, that's just a sign that your body needs something. Your body's, hey, I am like depleted in something. I need something. I'm missing some sort of nutrient or mineral balance or something. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, it definitely spoke to the question. And I heard in it too, like something that I know me and Mary Lou have both talked about a lot, in the sense that when you are replacing the external, like the SSRI, with a different type of external helper or ally or something, there is such a different relationship with it when you're calling it in temporarily and you're saying, okay, what do you have to teach me? Maybe I can work with you day to day over an extended period, but not creating a permanent relationship with that where it's just like a pill, where you do it just like you would a pill. And it speaks to that you were saying the generation that taught all of us that there's like an authorized channel that you can work through. And that's why we're going to end up with government weed and government psilocybin and government ketamine. And like normal people who are not ready to have their whole Kundalini awakening or whatever are going to go to the government ketamine center and have a dose of the channel opening and do that to solve a specific problem rather than doing it to explore their relationship to like oneness or like unity with the self. So it's a very different relationship that we are approaching, that many of us are approaching these alternative teachers with than like our ancestors would have, because our ancestors never would have, used fly agaric every single day, the same way that people now are using SSRIs every day or microdosing every other day and doing that for literally years.
Yeah. And our female ancestors didn't need to, because by the time they were 25, they'd experienced natural birth at least once, usually multiple times, which is the mother of all psychedelic experiences and is so beyond anything you can get from something outside of yourself. So it wasn't necessary. And, I'm hearing, not that I want to go back to a time where the norm is we're all having a baby at 15, whether we like it or not, but that was the reality. And that is our lineage as women. And that got broken with industrialization too, that now many women have no active living female members of their family who have experienced that.
Wow. That is such an important point. Thank you. Yes.
It's just like we all want this. There's also the piece of, like you were saying, the fast track, where instead of the experience that you can get learning to harvest nettle without getting stung, learning that nettle can turn off your histamines rather than activate them, but you have to know how to interact with it, learning that if you take it into your body every day, you want to talk about mineralization, like that plant is the highest mineral content of any land plant. Doing that daily, learning the songs of the nettle that come to you, tending your nettle patch, letting it get bigger and bigger, that is a whole different kind of spiritual awakening that has a depth to it that is like, I view the psychedelics more as everybody wants like the matrix chip in the brain of I can do karate now.
Yeah, no, and I mean, what I'm hearing too is there's a rhythm and a cycle, and you're connected with the life cycle of a plant. Herbal, I mean, I'm just going to refer to it as herbal medicine to differentiate. Like, I've dabbled in it for sure, but I have like friends who are amazing, like plant mamas, and just I mean, you don't just go to a nettle ceremony and then leave and be like, I got the download. It's no, you walked us through, right? It's a slow, seasonal, cyclical. There's a rhythm, there's a grounded tending of the earth. Like I bet you 94% of people that sit with ayahuasca have never seen an ayahuasca plant.
Exactly.
Or the vine, or know that it's got, chacruna. There's such a disconnect from the actual embodied experience. I think it doesn't fulfill everything we're looking for.
No, and no judgment. Like we're all swimming in the same soup right now. Like it's just where we're at culturally that the connection has gotten so lost. But I do want to keep putting out that you absolutely, if you tend your lemon balm patch, you will start seeing fairies and having downloads. It's not as socially acceptable. You'll be considered more crazy than if you're seeing fairies when you're taking the rock stars. It's kind of the difference between your, these are the rock stars. It's like going to a big concert and getting the experience versus your friend comes over and plays you a song she wrote.
And both are good. Both have their place. Yeah,
right.
That's so special and sweet. I love that.
But one is unquestionably more depleting than the other.
Yeah, and it comes with a necessary integration period. Most of us are completely unfamiliar with because our lives demand a certain pace that we have to keep up with. And, an integration period is going to be different for every single person who undergoes any type of experience in life, whether it's a psychedelic experience or whether it's like your mom died. Like everything is a trip and everything's going to require integration, but not all of us are able to carve that out for ourselves because of the demands that we're trying to meet.
Right. And we're so much more, I mean, back to like kind of the fragility piece, like that is the most concerning piece for me, like it's one thing for the Shipibo who like have lived an indigenous lifestyle. Obviously that's shifting too, but still, like you go there and there's people with Black hair in their 70s, 80s, like they just are more mineral rich. Like it's how they, that's their lifestyle. And they didn't get onto the process to train in the same way and the pace of life in the same way that we have. And so it's one thing and I am not an expert by any means. I'm not going to say how they use the medicine, but I don't believe that they, are sitting with it in the same way that we're approaching it in the Western kind of consciousness. But they're going to be more able to do a no sodium, no fat diet before as dieta prep or a big deep dieta. They're going to be more resilient in that. When a Western modern, woman, especially who's been on birth control for 10 years, who probably got a download of heavy metals from her mom, probably didn't get, was maybe a C-section baby with no shame, but we're not getting like all of these nutrients spiritually, emotionally, and physically that we are supposed to have. And then we're stressed out. We have 2 kids, we're giving 4 pounds of minerals to each baby. we're working, we're running our household, we're trying to have a relationship, we're trying to be on Instagram, we're trying to like, oh my God, I'm exhausted just talking about it. And then we're going to be like, okay, yeah, let's go drink some ayahuasca. Let's do 4 ceremonies in a week, fly down to Peru, fly back, or whatever, go to Florida or go to Hawaii or do it in Minnesota, whatever. And I'm just like, whoa, that to me is like the level of depletion that mom is probably already at. And then we go into that. That's like mental breakdown territory. I mean, and I've heard awful ceremonies or awful stories of people going really deep into the ceremony lifestyle with something like ayahuasca, and it's not good for them, like there's mental impacts, there's emotional impacts. And I believe it comes down to minerals, and it just comes down to a severe depletion in the system. And obviously that's not the case for most people, thankfully, but I get concerned.
That is such a nice segue back into your story. So we reached the point in our interview where we were talking about your state of depletion, and then what happened?
Yeah, I don't remember how I started following some pro-metabolic nutritionists. So that's an approach by Dr. Ray Peat, who focuses on lifestyle nutrition approaches to improve the metabolism, and viewed the metabolism as like the key to our health. So if we have a slow metabolism, everything's going to be sluggish. We're going to have symptoms. If we have too fast of a metabolism, that's a problem too. So we need to have an adaptable, balanced, regulated metabolism. So I started following some nutritionists, and then I won this HTMA on a giveaway on Instagram. And yeah, I think I had been tuning into minerals. I've been tuning into like different things and just thinking about it a bit. And then I won this HTMA, and I never even spoke to her like we didn't speak at all. She just said, hey, send me your top 5 symptoms via email. And then she sent me a video recording of the analysis. And I was blown away by what she could see about me. She was like, oh yeah, with magnesium levels like this, you probably have a tendency to socially withdraw. And yeah, your potassium's really low, and that can cause feelings of fear. And that was like more on the emotional side of things, which I didn't even realize you could see that from minerals. But then there was, extremely sluggish adrenals, extremely sluggish thyroid. Those are kind of the main things, but there's, all sorts of like my blood sugar regulation was all out of whack, like all sorts of things that were just like really illuminating for me to be like, wow, okay, I really have been just burned out and pushing too hard. And I made a commitment that I would only have one thing on my to-do list for the day, and spent a lot of time on the couch. It was super uncomfortable. And I learned how to feed myself food. I learned how to cook myself breakfast within an hour of waking up, getting like 30 grams of protein in with breakfast, not ignoring my hunger cues and eating a lunch that I cooked. And at this point I had to cook everything fresh because of my histamine stuff. So 3 meals a day. I mean, yeah, but that was a massive rewiring for me. And that's something that I bring into my work, because most women aren't eating enough at all.
Yeah. And starving themselves at weird times. Like you said, waking up and eating within an hour of waking is so alien to so many of us. Not for nothing, because we start the day with coffee and a cortisol rush of trying to get our emails answered, but also because a lot of us have bought into the wisdom for men of like strength training or losing weight that says, yeah, you should fast for 8 hours a day. I should eat food. I need to eat food. It's not right.
There's so much too that I've seen, both for women and men, where things like any kind of restrictive approach, it's kind of like a sneaky cover for disordered eating disorder land. There are many people that are like, I'm intermittent fasting, but they're not making up for their caloric load in the window of eating. They're just like starving themselves essentially. And I see that a lot, and it's like, it's not good or healthy.
Okay, so you're eating, you're resting. Tell us how that felt.
Okay, so there's another piece to this whole equation. So I was in a relationship that was starting to really crumble, and it was not a healthy relationship. And we were engaged, or no, we weren't engaged at the peak, but around that time we got engaged. And then a year later after that, we broke up. yeah, looking back, I'm like, that was a big part of like I couldn't settle, my nervous system couldn't settle in this relationship. So that I was constantly activated. I couldn't obviously see it super clearly at the time, but now I'm like, oh my God, that's when talking about healing in general, it's like, we have to look at everything. It's a very holistic process. Like, I don't think I could have found this level of vitality if I had stayed in that relationship, even if I had done all the other things, because I was in an environment that was essentially like oppressive to my nervous system. So there was that happening. But so like the reflections I was getting were not great from this person, like he was very uncomfortable with me kind of blobbing out on the couch. I was gaining weight. One of my nutritionists that I was working with, she's like, most women or like many women probably are healthiest at like 10 to 15 pounds over what they think they should be at. Like we're just kind of used to this skinny mini for obvious reasons, but it's so that there's a whole dismantling of that paradigm of I would rather feel better and I feel more juicy and more fertile and more vital when I have a little like plump on me. And like that was not a great experience to go through that with an unsupportive partner. So that was, I feel like the challenge for me was more the relational pieces. Like I was pretty clear, like I just need to fully slow down. And I mean, it was hard. It was very hard. It was a very confusing time. I felt really like isolated and lonely. Like I felt like no one understood, because it's like when you look fine on the outside, people don't understand. And I've had this experience with other friends who have other chronic stuff going on. And I'm like, I don't really get it, but I wish you felt better. And I don't know how to connect with you on this. So it's a tricky, kind of uncomfortable thing sometimes. But yeah, it was definitely really hard. It was definitely like probably one of the hardest like portals of my life.
So you'd been instructed to increase magnesium and potassium as two things. Did the person you were working with advise you to take supplements, or did you work with food to increase the minerals that you felt like you were deficient in?
Yeah. Okay. So clarification. So there's, multiple approaches to minerals, but from what you just shared, that's like a replacement therapy. That's okay. Magnesium's low, potassium's low. We need to just supplement with those. And then that should work. That's not the approach that I do. The mineral balancing takes into account all of the synergisms and antagonisms of all the minerals. So that, if I give you zinc, that's going to lower your sodium level. There's very intricate, nuanced relationships between all the minerals. And, if I give someone a bunch of potassium, that can actually deplete magnesium even further, for example.
Or kill them.
Yeah. Or that. I mean, yes, totally. Yeah. So there's a lot more. That's why like the test to me is so important and helpful. And when we look at like sodium and potassium, for example, that's actually not representing so much what we're getting in the diet. It's representing how our adrenal hormonal system is functioning. So potassium is correlated with cortisol. So when I look at your potassium level on your chart, I'm seeing what's the cellular effect of cortisol in your body. And I can see kind of like where your body's at in ability to handle stress. Just an example. Okay, so back to the question about food versus supplements and like how did I did, it was a mix of food and supplements, and that's how I still work with people. It's food, supplements, and lifestyle. I don't believe you can just take supplements and not eat enough or not eat. Yeah, like you need to eat enough protein, you need to eat enough calories, you need to eat whole food, good quality foods, you need enough carbs. That's critical because our body's always going to absorb best from food. Food has the cofactors that our bodies know and the ratios. It's, it's like Mother Nature's medicine for us. And I did go through a phase where I was really trying to kind of do mineral balancing with whole food based approaches or supplements. So things like taking oyster capsules to get your zinc, that kind of stuff. And the deeper I got into this work, the more, because I was really like, synthetic supplements. No, I just wasn't into that. I wanted to just be like natural as possible. Whole foods are the way. Now I actually don't believe that because the levels of zinc, for example, that I would need to give someone to actually bring different minerals and ratios into balance it's not realistic to tell someone to eat oysters 7 days a week or take a ton of zinc capsules, which those are expensive also. And when we're talking about a lot of oysters, then there's a heavy metal component, unfortunately, these days, you know, like coming from the oceans. So a synthetic form of zinc that's well researched and you can give in like the doses that you need to give, I believe is appropriate and more effective at this point, along with, you know, the whole foods and the lifestyle and all the things.
So you're coming through this portal. It's really hard. Your relationship is changing. Your relationship to yourself is changing. What happened next?
Yeah. We ended our relationship 2 Christmases ago, I believe. And I went to Costa Rica because that's where I had been like 7 years prior. And I had this beautiful connective experience. And I was like, maybe I'll go live in Costa Rica again. That's always been a thing had in the back of my mind. Went to Costa Rica, you know, what do you do when you're like in a huge breakup? You don't know what to do with yourself. Like for me, it was go to Costa Rica. So did that, I had a great time in a lot of ways, but it was really challenging. My prayer when I got there was like, okay, like Mama Costa Rica, if I'm meant to be here, if you want me here, please let me know, make it very clear. And it was very clear that I was not meant to be there. I got like this weird jellyfish situation that I ended up having to get steroid shots for, which like I do not do that. I like have not. I am the kind of, I suffered with this crazy rash for 2 weeks. I did like clay bath. I did all this stuff. And finally I was like, I have to go to the doctor. Like this is, and you know, given my histamine like experience and history, I was like, okay. Anyway, so that happened and Costa Rica's changed so much. Like it was really kind of heartbreaking. So I feel like the matrix of kind of the US has been like kind of gridded there now. So yeah, I realized that wasn't my place. I went back to Cali, moved into a communal house we call it the Nourish House. It was a very like food oriented home with herbalists and chefs and nutritionists. And yeah, kind of just put myself back together and continued my replenishment and nourishment, continued studying. So at this point I was studying. I've taken 4 different mineral trainings and certifications because once I find something that works, I like go all in on it. And I was like, this just really resonated and it worked for me. And I've seen it work for so many. And there's a lineage of 50 years of evidence and data. And then, you know, I guess to get to this point now, I actually made the huge decision to move back home to Minnesota. So I did that in December. So it's pretty fresh, but I really want babies and I'm 35. You know, I was engaged and thought I was on this path and then kind of woke up one day. I was like, oh my God, I'm 35 and I'm single. Oh my God. So that's been a whole thing, obviously, and we could talk about that. But I do feel like I'm so much more nourished. Like I'm so much healthier now than I was in my 20s, you know? And at this point now I'm like, man, it'd be so nice if I had like 4 kids and I like got pregnant in my 20s and just, you know, like I have these kind of, oh, what ifs, but I also am just like, whew, I think like for my baby's sakes, like they're going to be much more set up for a more like healthy life given, you know, how much I have done. And also there's like more to do, you know, I don't think it's like just a couple year thing. It's like a generational, you know, I think we need to replenish on a generational level.
That's so true because I know that when you have a baby, they just in the process of growing that baby and giving birth to that baby's going to take a lot of your minerals. They have to take a lot of your minerals to start out with. And so if you're coming from a place of depletion, what do you have to give your baby? And then you're in a postpartum where we already have a culture where women are not in a village and women are not given tons of support typically in the postpartum period. So you're physically depleted. You might be emotionally burnt out and now your baby has all the minerals that used to be inside of you. I feel similar feelings because I'm 36 and I'm like, oh, man, if I had babies when I was 20, ancestrally would be more appropriate, then I would already be, you know, my kids would be freaking teenagers by now. But I did not have the power to be a mother back then. I mean, I would have been initiated, but that's just not the path I took. So here we are.
There's so many of us. There's so many.
Well, and all of that can be true and is true. And there are global antinatalist forces selling a long con to women to take these mineral depleting, sex drive depleting, libido depleting drugs. And yeah, I mean, we're all caught in this web of, and it's all of it. And maybe it is necessary for the human experience, for so many women to experience this later initiation into motherhood. But a lot of it is as like what we're being fed culturally too.
For sure. I mean, I used to work at Google. Sorry, did I interrupt?
No, go for it, please. I
Um,
want to hear about Google.
yeah, that's whole nother lifetime. But I used to work at Google, and they would pay for you to freeze your eggs, and in the whole theme of so you can work longer
Yeah,
and
I know.
more.
Which is so crazy from where we all are nutritionally. Like, I do not want to eat a chicken egg that's been frozen for 14 years. Why would I want to make a baby out of a human egg that's been frozen for 14 years?
When my body has 14 more years of, settling into habits that are going to be making it really hard for me to wake up and feed this
Yeah.
baby every 30 minutes.
Oh,
It's
what does
kind of a
that?
young woman's game to have a baby in some
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah,
But
totally.
what does it do to the egg to be frozen that long? Let alone an embryo. Wow, that's a whole other conversation. And we probably are not going to find a lot of industry funded research on the negative sides of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so here we are. I'm glad you're feeling nourished. You're back in Minnesota. You moved to Minnesota at the beginning of winter. That's a sign of feeling hardy and strong.
Kind of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're feeding yourself, and yeah, this is a great story. So do you still feel like you have a lot of repair to do, or do you feel like you're at a place where you feel well nourished and it's just work of maintaining that?
Mm. Kind of both. Like I'm
Mm,
definitely not in a place of, managing my symptoms every day, which I'm so grateful for because that was a hard, journey. So yeah, I feel really blessed and grateful to just, live my life and be able to be active and go play pickleball with my dad and whatever. And also like my mood, I'm just so like regulated and stable, and that's so nice because like the other thing that I was struggling with was like really intense emotional ups and downs with PMS, and just, like I did not feel, I would not have called myself stable. And now I feel just really like quite resilient, and like my nervous system is like pretty solid. And, like I have strength training goals because I feel that feels so good in my body, in a very hormonally like supportive feminine way, but just building muscle. And from a mineral balancing perspective, people like some of my teachers, it becomes a lifestyle, so for people that really choose to, you can basically be mineral balancing for years because it's continuing to the kind of undercurrent of what's happening is as you're balancing your minerals, you're releasing heavy metals.
mhm,
So we first have to we have to build up our body's vitality and energy. Our body's not going to detox things if it doesn't have the energy to do so. And metals actually mimic minerals in our enzyme receptors. So lead and cadmium can take the place of calcium. If we're depleted in calcium, our body's going to hold on to more lead and cadmium. So it's a whole thing. And so what happens is over time, as we're rebuilding vitality, we're working on making sure the body's detoxing properly, like usually around 9 months to a year, you'll start to see metals spike on the test because the body starts to excrete more metals because it's actually starting to have more minerals. And yeah, just given, like we were talking about with the generational toxicity that we unfortunately have, I have teachers that have been doing this for probably 10, 15 years. And I think like the first few years can be like the most intensive as far as releasing metals. But yeah, it can be an ongoing practice. So I'll be continuing to do that.
that makes sense. We're never done, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're never done with the stressors either.
Hmm. Absolutely. Hmm.
So like the good thing it sounds is like a lot of the work is in getting in touch with your body, which is always fun and good.
Hmm.
And
eating good food, which is always fun and good.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like a sustainable thing to continue to put energy into. I'm curious if the release of heavy metals in the body is associated with aggravated or different symptoms for people who
Oh
start
yeah.
this path.
Yep. So this is, the rhythm that is ideal for this work is we do a test. We have, supplements, nutrition, lifestyle are the kind of three pillars. The supplements specifically are meant to be taken for 3 months because they're directional. So if you have a low vitality ratio, which is one of the most important ratios on the test, we're going to give a variety of, a formula that's meant to bring that ratio up. That's the sodium to potassium ratio. We want to bring that ratio up, but I don't want to push you too far in the other direction. So it's a 3-month protocol for the supplements. And then we retest, see how you're feeling, see how, the results of your hair minerals have changed and metals, update supplements as needed, and then retest. And then 3 months and then retest. So it's an ongoing cadence and rhythm. And a really important part of that is to stay in touch as a practitioner with your people, because I have a client that's got this, you can have all sorts of symptoms reoccur. So you can have old symptoms come back. It's like a healing reaction. It's called retracing. So if you can imagine like the graph of your minerals, let's say you had migraines for 2 years of your life. Imagine like what your minerals looked like at that time, just like some kind of like chart. So as you're healing and replenishing your body with minerals, your minerals can actually like go back through that same pattern that it was at the time where you had those migraines. So you might get migraines again. Usually it would be like a much shorter period of time, or it might be like a headache, not a migraine or something. But it can be really, disorienting because you're like, I'm getting worse. These are coming back. But it's actually your body now has the vitality to go back and resolve the mineral imbalances that were happening at that time. And as obviously metals releasing is really a root cause for a lot of our issues. So as you're releasing nickel, for example, it's known as the depression and suicide mineral. So one of my teachers who was on benzos for 6 years, insane. That's like the hardest thing to detox from, I think, like harder than opiates. And that was like, he was like prescribed those by his doctor for 6 years. He went through a really intense nickel elimination and was having some pretty intense, like intrusive thoughts, like suicidal thought stuff for a few weeks there. And once he made it through, he's never had them again.
Do the benzodiazepines cause people to take up more nickel?
That's a good question. I don't know if that's why he had the nickel. I don't know what the source of nickel was for him. It could be part of that. I don't know.
So interesting, they're saying, because the nickel is like the saddest of all the coins, right? It's just, no one gets excited about it. I don't know if it's even made of nickel anymore.
Yeah, it's got a psycho-spiritual component. It is the saddest of the coins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what do the tests consist of when you say you redo the tests and see where people are with their minerals?
Yep. So we take a sample of hair. You can think about like a teaspoon. You take a sample as close to the scalp as possible, and you just need like the inch closest to the scalp. So we send that into a lab. They burn it and use spectrometry to measure mineral and metal contents in the ash.
Oh
Um,
my God.
yeah. Yeah. And
That's
so
so weird.
because our hair is in an elimination pathway. We have urine, sweat, bowel movements, and then our hair, it's a very slow growing medium. So that's also why that's why we have that 3-month window. And so I'll get like raw data, and it shows the 4 macro minerals. So calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and then trace minerals like zinc, phosphorus, chromium, selenium, iron, copper, manganese, and then metals. So what I'm looking at is levels, like individual levels, and also ratios of the minerals to each other. And then also looking at metals. I could go really deep, but if you have more questions, let me know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That is kind of well, tell me if I'm changing the subject too much, but I've been thinking about what you said about getting your results back of your mineral analysis and how the practitioner was basically able to read you like a book about your personality. And I am, as an astrologer, in medical astrology, which I'm not a medical astrologer, but I understand that every planet has a rulership over vitamins and minerals in our bodies. And you could look at a chart and say, because I have a stellium in Aries, I have, 5 planets conjunct in Aries in the second house. This is like a very difficult placement for the second house, which is ruled by Venus, and Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars rules, what is it, like, I think molybdenum or phosphorus or something. Anyway, I don't remember what the mineral is, but the point is that you could look at somebody's chart and come up with the reason that they either absorb too much of a mineral or are naturally depleted in a mineral based on their stars. And the reason I am thinking about this is because when you said that she was able to see these things about your personality, I'm so curious about your star chart and if you know your human design profile. But really, the real question I'm curious about is, how did your personality change once you started to put so much effort and intention behind remineralization? Did new hobbies emerge? Did new parts, like emotional states of being that were more dominant? Tell us about your personality.
Such a good question. I mean, yeah, this is really like one of my mentors calls it like an oracle. It's a cellular oracle. She used to be an astrologer. I dove deep into astrology for a while. So it's so fun. It's like reading a chart. You're like, oh,
It
wow.
even looks like a chart. What you have posted on your website of the circle with all the minerals and the way that they are interconnected with each other. It is so, it's the language of the planets moving, but on a cellular level in your body.
Yeah. Yep. So I would say like I am just way more relaxed. I feel way more like confident, empowered, just okay in myself, like less. I was in a pattern, my first test called sympathetic dominance, which is essentially like a chronic sympathetic nervous system fight or flight state. It's also called a pusher pattern. So I was in that state. And so when people are in that state, they're just like running around, like they can't relax, like just doing too much. So that shifted. I mean, I was actually just talking about this with a friend the other day. So I had that low potassium, which can be related to fear. I used to have this really unfounded, like nothing traumatic happened that I know of in my current life, but I was terrified of like someone like coming in the house. I was scared of being alone at home at night. And I like had this fear that someone was going to like break in or someone was in the house and I didn't know, like all these weird things, like to the point where one time I called the police.
And it
like
wasn't because you had a trauma early in life
no.
where someone was in your house. It was just like a low-key paranoia.
Yeah, like just legitimate paranoia. And I would convince myself that was the thing too. I'd be like, someone's downstairs. And like, anyways, I don't have that anymore. I live alone now. And yeah, that fear is just not here. I feel way more able to be social and not be as like socially anxious. I have energy. I like started learning how to DJ. I've been getting into pottery. I'm going to the gym. I just feel like I'm engaged in my life in a way that I've always wanted to be, but never could. I just didn't have the energy to do it. So I was kind of in this, I would be like, okay, I got to take care of myself. I'm going to get into the gym. And then I would go to the gym for a week and push myself too hard and then get exhausted. And I couldn't like sustain. I couldn't get onto like a natural, like consistent rhythm with things. And now my sleep is pretty solid. I mean, I go through phases. I just moved, like that was a huge stressor and definitely threw me off. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm like living some perfect life. I'm not. I'm still human. But when like the food is dialed, the sleep is dialed, you're like inspired by your work or you have hobbies that inspire you, you have friendships, it's like you should be able to be happy and content. That should like kind of back to what you were saying in the very beginning, that is, I believe, like our natural state, like we don't need to be feeling guilty, feeling anxious, feeling rushed, feeling stressed. And I've worked hard to design my life in a way where I don't I don't put myself in situations where I have to do that. And some of that is like privilege, but a lot of that is me choosing that. most of that. It's all me choosing that, basically, you know?
I love thinking about the fractal nature of reality and the stars and then the mineral content of our cells mirroring each other in the same patterns. Very cool.
Yeah, as
Well,
within, so without, so they say.
if we have time, I have a couple of questions of just, I'm in this generational spot where I trained with elder midwives where the line hadn't gotten broken with, well, I don't know, where these were women whose ancestors had immigrated here, so things had gotten broken. I want to hear your thoughts on some of the nutritional mineralization advice that I had been given by elder midwives when I was a young student midwife. And it was told women need to do these things or they'll lose a tooth every pregnancy.
Ooh.
So one is, what are your thoughts on blackstrap molasses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a thumbs up. Yes.
And what benefit does that have? When you think of blackstrap molasses, what mineralization help would that provide?
You know, I know that it's a good source of B vitamins. That's the thing on the top. I'm not like I don't know a ton about it. What I know about it is B vitamins, and I think it's really mineral rich from what I know.
Yeah. Cooking in cast iron pots.
You know, I'm for it. You know, yeah. I think as long as they're well seasoned, you know, you don't want to get like that iron in your food, but I mean, they're definitely the most enjoyable pots and pans to cook on, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm for it.
Bone broth.
Yeah.
And throw not just bone broth, but I actually never heard the term bone broth from these women. I heard make sure you throw a whole ham hock in your beans. When you're cooking beans, stick a ham hock in there. And so that, yeah, which to me seems even cooler than bone broth in some ways.
Totally.
Okay, and then this one comes from my lineage of the elder women on my German side of my family, pig's feet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, and I just want to clarify, I merge more like a traditional foods, pro-metabolic Weston A. Price approach with my mineral work. The diet of the mineral balancing is different, and they would probably like someone that was like hardcore following that would probably have different answers to those things. But yeah, I'm more like we need the collagen, the gelatin, like we're missing these essential amino acids and parts of the animal in our diet. And I think that's super important, especially for women. Yeah.
Very cool. This has
Yeah.
been such a great conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. I really loved like both of your perspectives, and yeah, this was great.
Oh, I love all the places it went.
I know. I honestly, I love talking about psychedelics because I'm obviously my story in many ways, I was taught so many things by them, and yet there is this shadow side that I think many are unwilling to talk about because the plant teachers are masters. It feels almost like disrespectful to say that like you could develop a parasocial relationship with grandmother ayahuasca. Like the reality is that there are people out here who are doing it every weekend because they want to get high and they want to heal too, but there is a tangling up of the belief that you get healed by getting high, when in actuality, that is a fun side effect of doing ayahuasca. The healing happens on a different level than the part where you're like having a drug trip, in my opinion. But I almost feel like there's this element because plant spirits have a will of their own and a mind of their own. I think people forget that they're entering into a relationship. Just like if Mary Lou and I have a relationship together, we each have motivations that bring us to the relationship, and therefore we have agendas that would bind us together. And people, because we're not used to thinking in an animistic sense, even though we can sit here and say that ayahuasca is the spirit of a grandmother, we forget that she also has a will and motivation. She may have an agenda, and she may call people to her in a way that they form a dependency on her, and she gets the opportunity to live and breathe and be out in the world. It's almost like you forget that everything that has a spirit and a will is neither good nor evil. It is, but all things. And so we develop this reverence where it's impossible to
recognize that there is actually something you don't know about the spirit of ayahuasca that will never be revealed to you in a drug trip,
Yeah.
which is the will of.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a purity. I mean, there's a lot of purity complex in that world too. And that's a little bit kind of what I'm hearing of like purity as in ayahuasca can do no wrong, or like she's
Yes.
revered ultimate good,
Yes.
But so there's that level. But I think one thing I wanted to touch on too, because I loved what you said about the getting high. Like that's a huge, I think that's a huge thing. Like I was definitely like microdosing to get high and be out of my body and not feel what I was going through.
Sometimes
But
we need to be out of our bodies, or we think we do.
yeah, totally.
We need to be honest about that.
Yeah. And there's also the Western complex that we put onto this medicine work of healing is working really hard. Healing is suffering. We are not healing if we are not having the most hard, intense purging night of our entire lives.
You need to do the work, Sena. You need to get in there and do the work.
And that is so detrimental on so many levels. And it's so opposing to what my experience of actually healing has been, which is this slow, this subtle. Are you eating 3 meals a day?
Are you sleeping?
Are you sleeping? Are you walking on the earth? Are you going for walks? Like that is where the true healing in my experience has come from. Not to say that I didn't have, healing experiences and received so much from that work, but approaching it from that harder, better, faster place, I think will run you into the ground eventually.
And there's also the aspect of who you are in your community and just
Identity.
Ken is like a Capricorn midwife trained in the wise woman tradition. I'm just going to say the people who are currently on ayahuasca are of no use to me when things are going down and the mothers need help and the children need help. Like they are completely, absolutely incapable of being responsible.
It's the meme of everybody wants to do ayahuasca, but nobody wants to do the dishes.
But it's even beyond that. Like they are actually a drain on the system if a lot of collective work needs to be done while they are high all the time. And I'm not saying they're, everyone who does ayahuasca is a drain on their community, but I'm saying if that's how you're spending 72 hours a week of your life, what I'm hearing is you're not helping your sisters who are postpartum. You're not showing up. And during that time when you are actively communing with the ayahuasca, if an emergency is happening, you literally are of no use and you may be a detriment.
Yep.
I don't think that piece gets enough attention within the cultural dialogue about this.
That's so true. I love the Capricorn. I love knowing that you're a Capricorn. I'm like, yes. Sneak it.
And what are you, Sena?
Oh yeah. So in Western astrology, Aquarius, Sun, right on the cusp of
Which
Pisces.
cusp? Okay.
February 18th.
Ooh, that's my best friend's birthday.
Really?
But she's a Pisces, 0 degrees. It's nuts.
Yeah, I'm 29. 29 degrees. Pisces moon, Libra rising. Rising. I really my Libra rising kind of holds me back from saying some of those things so directly. But then when people say that, I'm like, yes, that's how I really feel. Yeah, those are my main.
I love that. Do you know your human design?
Manny Gen. That's human design.
Yeah, that's human design. Yeah.
Manny Gen, sacral authority.
Cool. I mean, that's so important to the question of burnout and like relating to like what actually is enlivening versus what is depleting. I think everybody who is interested in human design needs to start from there. Like what do you actually have the energy for? And that really is what I get from your mineral work is that it all comes back to like cellular energy. We're all electric. We have electric currents in us. And in order to have a current that's like a full circuit and complete, we have to be mineralized. So I have a great deal of coming into this conversation, I have a great deal of skepticism about minerals on account of like people who just take pills are, people always tell, oh, you got to take this and that supplement. And I'm always just, but what if it interacts with other things in my body? I'm not a scientist. I don't have the depth to understand how this, calcium, which is probably just chalk, mostly chalk, is like interacting with, so the only thing I trust is like to eat a little bit of raw liver every day or every other day. And that's been my approach to minerals. But I think I need to really consider the, yeah, the idea of the full circuit of it all, because I've really, so much of what you said really resonated. And I have so little energy. I'm just like I've been spending years just trying to come back from a state of burnout, a state of chronic burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I think I really needed a 29-degree Aquarian to explain this to me, because I also came into this with not so much skepticism, but resistance, because part of the pathology I see in our world is hyper reductionism and our self concept centering around chopping ourselves into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces, and no one feeling whole because of that. So I very much resist reductionism, but I like rocks and crystals. And listening to you, I'm just thinking of the liquid crystalline matrix of my being, and understanding, of course, the mineralization of who I am is going to affect how I vibrate and behave and feel in this world. So I really appreciate your clarity with that.
Oh, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is like one of the best podcasts I've ever done. I'm like, yeah, because you guys are bringing in like things that I believe and don't touch on very much, like I lived in Nevada City, California for a long time. And so I was around all the, I don't know, super hippie midwife, like that whole scene. And it's a very big part of how I see the world. But I don't get to bring it out that much, or I don't know, it just doesn't come out that much in some conversations. So yeah, it's all real. And and that's the thing. I think the thing that really hit for me, because again, I was like, I want to heal it all from food, and we should be able to get everything we can from the earth. And, if I just lived this certain lifestyle, I should be super happy. And I have a lot of clients, a lot of mamas like from Nevada City that are like homesteading. They like eat, they have their raw milk from their own cows or their own goats, and they have their gardens. Like they're like doing the life that like you see on Instagram. You're like, God, I wish I could do that. And they're like, why the fuck don't I feel good? Like they're just like really frustrated. And that's what clicked in for me with this work is, in a way, it's not all our fault. We are the product of so much like toxicity, and the like modern matrix that we're in is hurting us. It's like impacting that liquid crystal matrix that we're made of. There's very real impacts on a physiological level. And so that's where I was like, yeah, I love like shamanism, and I love, the idea that like every, physical thing has a spiritual root. And we also have to take into the mundane physical world. And this was, I will say, as an Aquarian, this was a really, like, it took me 35 years to get to this place, because I really didn't like this whole thing very much. But now I'm like, no, this is real. Like, we have to start with like our physical cell, or not, we don't have to start there, but it's a very important part of the healing equation. Is we have to put ourselves in this modern day context. We can't just try to live like a homesteader, 500 years ago, and think that we should be okay, because our
the soil isn't the same today as it was
soils
then.
are so depleted. We are getting toxins from our air, water, food every day, no matter where they're grown. And yeah, there's just some like reality check moments that I've had of like kind of synthesizing, like that's where, okay, synthetics aren't terrible. Okay, like technology can be really like important in this day and age, right? Like kind of merging all of these opposing feeling approaches.
Yeah, what's the middle path between being dogmatic about if it come from a synthetic synthesized mineral, then it's fake,
Right.
or unless it comes from food, it's, it's because our food is so toxic. There's not, there's got to be a middle path between those things. I love that.
Yeah. What a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the How I Healed podcast. We are so happy to have you. If you liked this podcast, please consider sharing it with a friend. Like it, subscribe to us on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. We are so excited to receive your feedback. So do drop us a line at howihealedpodcast@gmail.com if you would like to send us a message. You can also reach us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, all the usual spots. So thanks again for tuning in and for supporting our project.